Human Evolution, What About Us? By Brian Morris. All of our advanced technologies, our cultures and civilized existence puts a psychological distance between humans and the natural world. We like to believe our superior intellect puts mankind above other forms of life, and that we are special, possibly even created as is by the divine. The idea that we are nothing but a clever derivation of the ape, molded out from natural forces of the natural world, can be difficult to accept, for some of us more than others. Science has put forth strong evidence to argue that human beings were not created as is, but evolved from ancestral lineages that trace all the way back to the very first cells, billions of years ago. 100 years ago, the fossil record of human evolution did not exist, aside one or two specimens labeled as unusual but human. The best explanations of our origins were religious in nature. This was the way of things until the turn of the 20th century. In 1924, the first fossil evidence of Australopithecus africanus was unearthed. The skull and brain case were both ape-like and human-like. It was a missing link in Darwin's theory of human evolution and stirred up an interest in fossil hunting for early human ancestors. More evidence was found in the coming decades. Species of Australopithecus and Homo discovered, and evidence of human descent from apes mounted, and we saw gradual changes in form to prove it. The first evidence of bipedalism is hinted at in a species from 6 million years ago called Sahelanthropus. The spinal column of this ape-like specimen entered the skull not from behind, as in quadrupeds, but a few degrees towards below. In bipedal organisms, the skull sits atop the spine. In quadrupeds, the skull is in front of the spine. Fossil evidence tells us Australopithecus were bipedal and possibly spent some time living in the trees as well. An excellent transitional form of evidence. An Australopithecus specimen named Lucy, upon examination, shows clear bipedalism with legs and waist practically identical to a human's, but the brain was still the size of a chimp's. It would seem that bipedalism came before brain power. Between 1 and 4 million years ago, many species of Homo and Australopithecus lived alongside each other. There was Homo habilis, Homo erector, Homo rudolfensis, Homo erectus, and at the least as many species of Australopithecus. It is from one or possibly more than one of these that humans evolved. Homo habilis was the first true tool user. Their fossils are often discovered alongside intentionally chipped stone flakes used as cutting and scraping edges. Homo erectus showed even more complex tool-making, and came not long after Homo habilis. Homo erectus made stone hand axes, and, the most important tool of all, evidence for control of fire, which allowed cooking of meat and gaining more nutrition. With Homo erectus disappearing 300,000 years ago, we have the appearance of Homo heidelbergensis and Homo neanderthalis, 500,000 and 230,000 years ago respectively. Like us, the Neanderthals buried their dead, and both of them disappeared no later than 28,000 years ago. One theory is that Homo sapiens evolved out of Africa from one of the ancient humanoid species and outcompeted every other hominin species as they migrated up into Europe and Asia, driving all of the others to extinction, and that is why we are the only species of hominin that survives today. Another possibility is one species such as the Neanderthals were absorbed into our own through crossbreeding. Genetics has shown humans contain a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA in our genome. Which species of early human evolved into us is unclear at this point, but what is clear is a gradual change in features over time from apes to early hominins to us. A few million years ago in East and Central Africa, there were climatic changes towards dryness, which evaporated the rainforests, and out of that came savannas and sprawling grasslands. Those were the perfect stage for human evolution to happen on. Bipedal forms do very little good in a dense jungle canopy, but they are ideal for flat grasslands. Compared to other hominins, mankind are the least ape-like. Phenotypically, we have diverged the most away from the traditional ape format. We look much less like apes than all of the other species of Homo. We have an upright posture and walk on two legs. We have a greatly enlarged cranial cavity packed with a brain 2 to 3 times larger than other species of ape. This does not always correlate directly with intelligence, however. Apes have a rectangular row of teeth, while ours arch in more of a parabolic shape. Our faces are flattened, and we have larger noses and brow ridges. We have much reduced canine teeth and smaller teeth in general, not to mention being nearly hairless compared to apes. On the genetic side of human evolution, much time and effort has been spent investigating our past and what makes us different. Chimpanzees share a staggering 99% of their genome with us, and are our closest living cousins. Our protein sequences differ in amino acids only by 1.5%, which is actually quite significant when it comes to proteins. A single amino acid substitution can have large impacts on form and function of a protein. It is also determined that 6% of the human genome is not even present at all in chimpanzees. What makes us human is multifaceted and cannot simply be pointed at with a stick. Not all humans look alike. Europeans, Africans, Indians, and Asians are all clearly discernible from one another. Interestingly enough, as a species though, humans are not very diverse genetically. In an actual population size, we have approximately 7 billion people, but our effective population size is way, way smaller. The number for our effective population size is 10,000, meaning, given the amount of genetic diversity applied to some standard, we would expect to see a human population size of 10,000 on Earth. That amount of diversity, 7 billion humans with the diversity expected of 10,000. Such a small effective population size is consistent with the out-of-Africa theory and indicates one, if not multiple, population bottlenecks in our past. There are no races within our species, although some people, like Adolf Hitler, may disagree, and there are certainly no subspecies of humans either that we are aware of. Our gene pool is relatively homogenized, with most of our noticeable differences, like skin color, being environmentally influenced and reinforced through sexual selection. We all share the same genome. Stereotypes and hatred have been around for a while and argue differently, but races have been scientifically debunked with genetic evidence through technology developed in the 20th and 21st century. Does evolution have implications on morality, ethics, and behavior? The big philosophical questions about life, such as purpose and meaning, do not fall under the umbrella of science. It is stated by some that evolution taught in schools will somehow cause our children to abandon their morality and grow up to be criminals and murderers or something like that. A mindless, purposeless, accidental existence invokes much anxiety in those who seek answers to philosophical questions on existence. We came from monkeys, and that insight will cause us to behave as monkeys, so they say. Today, with cars, airplanes, and globalization, isolated populations of humans required for speciation don't really exist. It is unlikely that strong trends of sexual selection will lead towards speciation will happen anytime soon. Today, because we modify our environments, natural selection does not act very strongly on humans. Genetically bad traits that would have been selected against, like making one a poor hunter, are now no problem to our existence. Medical science increases life expectancy and the probability of survival for young, along with the persistence of bad genes. Since bad genes are no longer selected against, they will persist in the human population. That isn't to say, however, with all of our technologies that human beings have escaped evolution. As long as there is genetic variation and affects whether we have children or not, and as long as some have children more than others, selection can act on the variation in our genes and change our allele frequencies over time. Besides, there has not been enough time since civilization began 6,000 years ago for much evolutionary action to happen. There are a few small examples of evolution within the human genome recent times, like the gene regulating lactose tolerance is usually shut off after birth, but in today's time, many people keep that gene on through adulthood and have tolerance to lactose throughout their life. At the end of the day, we are biological constructs governed by the laws of nature. Like extinction, evolution is unavoidable. It can and will happen. However, we will always do our darndest to escape nature's efforts. It is, after all, what we do as humans. Like I stated, humans are still evolving. The lactose gene is one small example. As long as we have variation, and that variation affects how many offspring we leave behind, and if we die before we are done reproducing, then selection will act on that variation, and we will evolve. Yes, we are evolving, and always will, but we are also slowing down the evolution process, since we don't need to adapt to our environments.